Are your JDE users saying JDE isn't working, but nobody is sure whether the issue is functional or technical? Are tickets getting routed to the wrong person before the real fix even starts? In this episode, we'll break down the difference between JDE application support and technical CNC support with practical examples of what each team really handles. By the end, you'll know how to route issues faster, reduce confusion, and decide what kind of JDE support your team really needs. Welcome back to Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards. I'm your host, Nate Bushfield, and today we're answering a common support question for JDE teams. How do you know whether an issue needs application support or technical CNC support? Because when a user says JDE isn't working, that could mean a process issue, configuration issue, security issue, badge problem, or maybe something deeper in the technical environment. But joining us today is Miranda Coyne, a service delivery manager at ERP Suites, to break down the difference and explain how JDE teams can route issues faster and avoid repeated questions. Miranda, welcome back to the show. It's been a while since you've been on. So, for the people that are out there that might have not seen you the first time, can you give us a little bit of background for us?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Nate. Thanks for having me again. It's great to see everybody and talk to everybody again. I've been with ERP Suites now for over 16 years, which is just crazy. But I started out in a CNC role. Technically, I started out as a co-op, but then graduated college and then was hired on as a CNC full time. So I'd been in the CNC role for the last, I would say, 14 years, and then in the CNC tech lead role for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And then I've just recently moved into the FDM position as well. But I'm still kind of balancing both acts, but still a lot of experience in CNC and still work in CNC every single day. So a little bit about me.
It's awesome. You are a reoccurring guest now, and with that comes a little bit of a responsibility for our viewers out there. So, you know what? Let's just get into it. When a
Okay.
company says they need JD support, how do you separate application support from technical CNC support?
Yeah, so like really I'd say this is one of the first, things that we try to untangle whenever a company comes to us and says, we need JDE support. I mean, that phrase can really mean two completely different things. And the way I try to frame it is kind of with one question. And I try to ask, is this about what the software does for the business, or is this more about keeping the software running and deployed? And I feel like that one question really kind of helps sort out almost everything when it comes to we need JDE support. So on the application side, which we kind of call it application/functional side here, that's the actual business process and how that works, and that's living inside the modules. So think of things like finance, distribution, manufacturing, HR. It's kind of the things like our GL isn't posting the way that we expect, or the tax is calculating incorrectly on this order type. A functional person thinks in terms of the business cycle. So procure to pay or order to cash, they're not thinking really about that technical backbone or let's say servers of that matter or anything like that. So from the CNC side, think of CNC, it stands for Configurable Network Computing. And that's actually the platform and that technical backbone of the JDE system. So it's the package build, the deployment, the web servers, the logic servers. It's doing tools releases, ESUs. We do web logic patching, Java patching, performance tuning. So the giveaway there, I feel like, is the stuff like nobody can log in, or the system is really slow across the board, or we need to push this change to production. So it's kind of a totally different skill set. So that's kind of, when a company says we need JDE support, that's kind of how we initially separate out the application functional support versus the CNC support.
Yeah. So let's dive in a little bit deeper on that. What are maybe some examples of issues that clearly belong to that application slash functional side of support?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the easiest way to spot an application issue is that the system is up, it's running fine. Nobody's locked out, but the business result is wrong. So, the software is doing something, it's just not doing what the business needs. So I feel like a classic one, for example, would be on the finance side. And that's something like the GL isn't posting in the way that you would expect, or you're running a transaction and it's hitting the wrong account, for example. Or sometimes maybe it just doesn't even post at all. And I feel like 9 times out of 10, that's something with the way that the module is set up or the account set up. It's a configuration thing inside that module. So nothing is really broken technically. It's just set up and doing the wrong thing. I would say like another one that comes up a lot is distribution. So, sales orders that aren't relieving inventory correctly. You ship a product out the door, but your on-hand quantity just doesn't move the way that it should. And again, like the system is working exactly as it's told to. It's just the order of those like activity rules inside the module, the line types, or like that setup behind the order. It's just not working correctly for the business. So that again points to that functional app side. Another one I think is a great example is tax. Like this one comes up all the time. So tax is calculating incorrectly on a certain order type or for a certain customer. And really that's like never a technical problem. That's just the way that the tax is set up and the rules that are behind it. So I feel like there's this whole category of how do I run this report? Why can't I find this field? Or how do I set up, a new item for a new supplier? That is kind of the end user support. And that's like actually helping people use the tool, the JD Edwards tool functionality to do their job. And so, like, really, if you think about it, the common thread across all of those things that I mentioned, like the GL, the inventory, I think I mentioned the tax and like kind of the how-tos, right? Like that the system is healthy, nothing's down, nothing's slow, everybody can log in. The problem is what the software is actually doing for the business, and that's really the big tell for that. So the moment you hear the result is wrong, instead of the system is broken, you're kind of almost certainly in that application functional support window there.
Right. I like how you put that. It's not that you can't do anything. It's just that the result isn't what it should be.
Right.
I like how you made that distinction. So let's switch to the CNC support side that's more technical. Is
Yeah.
that like what are some examples there?
Yeah. So, I mean, you think of the CNC side, it's kind of the mirror image of that, right? So, again, with the application support, the system is healthy, the business result is wrong. With CNC, it's the opposite, that mirror image. So, the setup might be perfectly correct in the modules, but the system itself, the technical backend, is just not cooperating. So, it's down or it's slow across the board, or we can't get something deployed, people can't log in. And I think really the most obvious one is, nobody can log in. So you have a whole group of users that, suddenly can't get into a particular environment. So, no business person has set, anything up wrong here. It's just that the platform is just not behaving as it should. So that's either a server issue, or I would say a sign-on security issue, an environment problem, and that's something that points to CNC every single time. Another one I would say is, the system is super slow across the board, and we get that a lot at CNCs. And, I specifically want to stress like across the board, right? So everybody is experiencing slowness, and that's really the tell. So if everything is dragging for everybody, then that's usually a server issue, whether that's the Jazz or the database enterprise server. Maybe it's a tuning issue. So we need to go in and evaluate what's going on with these servers, maybe tune them up. And that's really the infrastructure. Again, that technical backbone. Another one I would say is like, let's think of deployments. The pure CNC, right? So we build a change out, it's tested, and now we need to push that change to production. That whole world, the package build, the moving objects between environments, promoting up that code, that's a CNC's job. And a functional person just doesn't touch anything like that. So, there's everything with just keeping the platform current, applying patches, ESUs, doing tools release upgrades, really the maintenance of the technical backbone. Like nobody on the business side is asking for that in terms of a business result. So it's really just about keeping the whole environment healthy and just really supported. So the common thread here with that, the CNC side of things and CNC support is think of just again login, system slowness. We're doing deployments, upgrades, everything that keeps that JD Edwards system up and running. And that's kind of that fine line, right? So, yeah, if the plan is the system's broken or it's slow, need it deployed, just remember that CNC. If the result is wrong, that again points to application or functional.
So it's like the back end versus the front end for
Yeah,
this. Am I right in
it's a
that?
good way to look
Okay.
at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's it seems pretty simple, but obviously there are people that do confuse the two. Like, why is that?
I mean, like honestly, it's really understandable to be confused and kind of mix those two up. And it really comes down to, where the user is sitting. Kind of everything to them looks probably like an application issue. So, they're staring at a JDE screen and their whole experience, that's like their whole experience of the system. So whatever goes wrong, their instinct is, well, something's wrong with this application. Because the screen is the only part that they ever see, they don't see the servers behind it and the environments and how all that is configured on the backside. To them, it's just all kind of this is JDE. This is what I'm looking at every single day. So, a deeper reason I think is, the symptom that is happening really points to, specifically what that causes. So that is what really kind of confuses people. And like what the user is feeling and what's actually broken can be two completely different things. So you get these complaints that sound simple, but really, you could go a dozen different directions. So, take, I can't access this. It sounds like one problem, but that could be security. Or it could be the way that the module is set up and just not having the correct access and how the module is set up. Um, so another one is like, hey, this report is wrong. I'm not getting the correct, result from this report. So that could be a data problem, which is the functional side, but it could also be the logic behind the report. Maybe something didn't get deployed correctly, the wrong version got deployed. So that could point to CNC. So that's kind of where, the water gets a little hazy and it gets a little confusing. So the symptom doesn't just reveal like the root cause on its own. And that's just why things can just easily get, a little muddied up and a little confusing. So you also have to take in the organizational side of it too. So your business team, they know all the processes, they know how finance works, their distribution should work. So your IT team should know the infrastructure. So that's the servers, the networks, all that stuff. But JDE sits kind of right on top of both of those worlds. So a lot of issues need someone who kind of understands both, the technical backbone and the actual like processes that are happening in the functionality of JDE. So that's kind of where that gap lies, right in the middle. And again, that's where that confusion lives.
Yeah. So when that confusion happens, what typically do you see when these issues are routed to the wrong support person or even the wrong team?
Yeah, so I feel like a good way to look at that is that that's where it gets really expensive and like it's not in the most obvious ways. So, the most immediate thing is that tickets just take really a lot longer to resolve, which is not good. Something that should be a quick fix, kind of drags on for multiple days now. And it's all because it really started in the wrong place. And, it's had to find its way around to the right person. And obviously, the person that feels this the most is the user that is putting in the ticket. So they get bounced around. They're reporting the issue to one team. That team is poking around at it. Decides, you know what, this isn't mine. This isn't my team. They hand it off. Now the user is having to go tell their story to a whole nother team, and just that bounce back. And so time gets wasted there and they start to lose faith in that whole support process. And when everybody's trying hard, it just feels like that process is broken to them and they're not really feeling supported. And then behind the scenes, you've got all these teams that are burning time troubleshooting the wrong issues. And so somebody's digging into the server, convinced it's a CNC problem when really it's the module configuration. So you just have hours wasted kind of chasing the wrong thing. And then like this is the talent cost side too. You have
Yeah.
CNCs looking at one problem and they're wasting their time when it's not even a CNC issue and it's a functional issue and vice versa. So you're getting your key players here pulled into the wrong direction and where they could be working and resolving other things that are their specific, lane, right? So I think it just kind of unfortunately bites a lot of people in the long term when these issues get enshrouded, the root cause is just missed, right? So um, it comes back and it comes back again, and sometimes you'll start to see a pattern, and then the real root of the issue is just never actually getting resolved, which is also not what you want to happen. So with all of it, low tickets, just users getting bounced back and forth. You're wasting time troubleshooting with the wrong team, just experts kind of out of their lane and all these repeat issues. It just kind of traces back to, that one upfront decision of just making sure tickets get routed right the first time. And when you get that right, most of all that other stuff just kind of disappears, which is what we aim for, right?
Yeah. So it saves money, it saves time, it saves that downtime that you could be
Yeah.
dealing with one of your systems. And yeah, maybe the cost isn't exponential in the first part,
Yeah.
but it can add up over time if your system can't reach that resolve that you're looking for with one of these tickets. So yeah, main thing to remember is if it's a back end issue where something's moving slow, or maybe there's a process that's out of place.
Yeah.
And that's more of the technical side. And then if
Hmm.
it's a result issue where that number isn't adding up, it doesn't make sense of how that whole process is really getting done, then that's more of the functional application side. Am I right in those?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just remember it's the business result. It goes back to that functional application side, and like the technical backbone is that CNC layer.
Yeah. Okay. So when a user says JDE isn't working, how should teams kind of figure out whether the issue is functional or if it's technical or if it's both?
Yeah. So I'll be honest, JDE isn't working is probably I would say the single most common thing we hear. So if you're not putting a lot of detail in a ticket and somebody's just putting in something JDE isn't working, that is probably the least useful sentence in the world to us because it just doesn't tell us anything. It's the starting gun, but it's not the answer by any means. So I think the most important piece of this is kind of like what you ask next in this format, right? So the first thing that I was trying to do is kind of back up and just say, what are you like, what are you actually trying to do? Not what's broken, what were you doing when this happened? So tell me exactly the steps that you took, and then like what happened when you took these steps. Give me some screenshots. Give me as much information as possible. Like, were you trying to run a post batch? Were you trying to log in or enter a sales order? And the moment I know what the actual like task is, like what the user is actually doing, I feel like I'm kind
Mhm.
of halfway to knowing kind of which world we're living in here, whether that's the functional side or the CNC side. And then, the next thing you really want to try to figure out is the scope. Like, who is affected by this? What is the business process that is stuck here? And I feel like this one's big because, like, the scope is honestly the fastest way to sort out this issue. So, is it
Yeah.
just you? Is it everybody in your role? Is it one module? Is it a report? Is the whole system down, right? Because that tells you so much information right away. So if it's one person on one screen, something's not working specifically for them, everybody else seems to be doing okay. That kind of to me smells more functional. But if it's everybody's affected all at once, I mean that kind of smells more CNC, right? So that's certainly on the back end, on the technical back end or the platform of JDE. So I feel like the scope alone will point you really in a really good direction, before you kind of have to look towards other directions as well. And, like another thing too is I think this one is really important and maybe doesn't come up as often as it should, but what changed recently? Because most of the time issues do not appear out of nowhere. So,
Mm.
I'm asking things like, did we just deploy a package? Did we just deploy new code to production? Did somebody just update security or did any type of security change? Was there some kind of configuration change? Did we just come off a new tools release and some functionality is not working correctly? Or did you guys just turn on like a new integration and just not tell us, which has happened from time to time, more times than I'd like to admit. But really, like 9 times out of 10, whatever changed last is kind of sitting right next to whatever broke. So I feel like that question alone solves a like shocking number of these issues that we're seeing as well. So I feel like once you kind of get those three things in line, you kind of
Mm.
actually know where it lies, whether that's CNC or the functional application side. So we like to get as much information as possible because that just helps us identify the issue much faster. And if you can help us get to that, with all that information, get to that point, we're going to be able to help you so much faster. So, sometimes it can be both too. So I don't want to take that out of the pot either because there are plenty of times where it can be really red on the seam, and sometimes the application and functional team are working together with the CNC team to try to figure out what's going on because it can be confusing sometimes. And even for a CNC or a functional resource, it can be confusing for us, and we got to work together and just try to figure out you know, how to get past this issue and work through it together as a team.
Yeah. So, could you maybe give us an example of where an issue looks like application support, but is actually technical?
Yeah. So these are good ones too because it's kind of it helps being able to go through some of these things to understand like, hey, I think this is functional, but it's actually a CNC issue. So like one of the examples I would say is screen is, let's say a screen is broken after a recent package deployment. So some people might think, okay, that's the app is broken, but it could mean that there was an issue with the deployment of the package. So the deployment of that code going to production. And then, that's where a CNC would need to go dive back in, check the package build logs and see if everything built correctly and compiled correctly and was pushed out successfully. I would say another one would be, hey, this report is wrong. But that could be because the wrong version or object was promoted, and a CNC would need to go back and like validate the correct object got promoted, and that things again got deployed correctly. Users can complain that JDE is slow. So that could be issues with a bad report. So again, if you don't give us a whole broad spectrum of like, this is what's going slow for me. To think of a report that's out there running and it's backing up a ton of jobs. We're going and saying, okay, is there an issue with the web server? Did it max out on CPU memory? But some people think, well, maybe this is an issue with the job itself. So that's where that can get tricky, but it is pointing to CNC. Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of a
Yeah.
few examples of what I would say that, may seem like an application issue, but actually is more of a CNC issue.
All right, so let's flip it then. What's maybe an example or two of where it looks technical, but it's actually application support?
Yeah, so let's go back to the batch job, right? So a user submits a UVE and it errors out. And what could actually be the issue, and what sometimes most likely is the issue, is the setup with the UVE is wrong, or some master data may be missing, or there could just be bad data in the table. So the report fails, but the user's like, well, this isn't working. What's going on with the system? But really, it's a configuration piece or bad data, and that's on the functional side. Or you could get like a system error, but that could be caused by an invalid processing option. So, the system error is happening, but the functional resource didn't set up the, process processing option correctly. So they're there to kind of help figure that out and make sure that the correct processing option is in place and it's pointing to the correct, information, and it's, therefore going to run the next time successfully. Or let's say a hosting issue is caused by configuration or bad transaction data. So, again, that muddies up the water a little bit, but if a posting issue is out there and it's just not working, that user's sitting there going, well, this isn't working. So they're confused by if this is a whole CNC problem or if it's actually maybe, again, just let's say bad data. So those are, I would say, a few application or a few CNC type things that could look CNC but are actually functional setup and functional resource related.
So maybe going a step further of like how should reoccurring tickets like be used to improve this support model that we have in place?
Yeah, I actually really like talking about this because I feel like most companies kind of treat tickets as you get a ticket, you work it, and you close it. You fix it, you move on to the next one. But I feel like here at ERP Suites, we really try to take a step back and really look at these recurring tickets. And I feel like it's kind of one of the best signals you have where you can kind of take a step back and look at, why is this issue keep popping up, happening again and again. So I really like the trick is to stop looking at tickets one at a time and really look at them as a whole because I think the patterns can tell you really different things depending on like which side they're coming from. So, if you're seeing the same application tickets over and over again, so the same questions, same mistakes, it could be a setup issue. They're usually pointing to one or a few things, and maybe it's a training gap. So people genuinely don't know how to do the process. They don't know how the module works, and they need somebody to help them understand how this module works. And maybe it's a configuration problem that just never got fixed. So, people just kind of keep pushing that off. Um, and maybe that process is just funky, or maybe there's just bad data. But again, you keep looking at these reoccurring tickets and you start noticing these patterns. And like, again, we like to take a step back, see what's going on, and try to like fix that. So it goes the same way for the CNC side. If we're getting repeated technical tickets, it could be pointing to something with performance tuning or a monitoring gap or, something that's going on in the system that we need to take a step back and look at and say, if this server is constantly hitting, max resources, so it's maxing out on CPU or memory, like this is maybe an opportunity for us to add more resources to the server. And then hopefully that, orchestration that's running out there on the AIS server starts running more efficiently and isn't dying in the middle of processing. So really, I feel like when you kind of zoom out and you look across all the tickets and you see these trends, maybe also you could be simply just under resourced. So again, that's something if you kind of look at these and you're getting, you know, piled and piles of tickets coming up and you're just not able to handle that volume, it's useful to be able to look at that stuff and say, well, maybe we need to hire another functional resource or a CNC for that. So, really, I feel like the way I've just kind of sum it up is don't just close the tickets, like really read them, take a step back, look at the patterns. The individual ticket is a problem to solve, but like that pattern across all the tickets is really, I feel like, a roadmap and how we do a better support model for our customers. So the teams really just, they pay attention and they stop fighting the same fires over and over, and we just actually start fixing things. And not only does it make our lives easier, it makes our customers' lives a lot easier. So I feel like that's the most important piece of that.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. And it's that idea of like, yeah, you can have these recurring tickets and you can put out that fire every time. And yeah, that might be a quick win, but you're not
Hmm.
getting at the big fish there. You're not getting at the true
Right.
problem there. So you're going to have that problem over and over and over again until you really do. And that's a perfect way of putting it. Of take a step back, really assess why this is happening instead of being focused in on, all right, this is the specific issue. Let's try to fix that specific issue. Because then, yeah, you can see it in multiple things other than
Hmm.
just that one specific situation that you're in. But what should like a good classification look like between application and CNC teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, the most important thing here is just to really emphasize to the users putting in the tickets to just put as much detail as possible. I think that's really the first and like most important thing. What is happening? Where is it happening? How is it affecting you? Is it affecting just you or is it affecting multiple people? Has anything changed recently? And when exactly did this start happening? So those types of things are so helpful and really quickly just help us identify what's going on. And so from there, the goal is just identify that issue quickly, but not try to force that into the wrong bucket. So sometimes it's obviously an application issue, and then sometimes it's clearly a CNC issue. But again, there are plenty of situations where it's not immediately obvious, and that's okay. But I think the worst thing that you can do is just spend hours arguing over like the ownership instead of just solving the problem and working together as a team. So I feel like that's where that collaboration, part really becomes important. And if the root cause isn't clear, whether it's application again or CNC, it's important just to work together as a team behind the scenes. And that's helping the application team can validate the business process is working correctly, while the CNC team can verify, the environment or the backbone, technical backbone there, or the security, all that is working as it should. So, if you're able to look at it from both perspectives, I feel like usually you can get to that answer much faster than working in that like isolation or working on your own. But I would say at the same time, there still needs to be very clear ownership. So if both teams are involved and working together, I do think it's important that like one team owns that communication with the customer because you don't want that back and forth. And then again, you're wasting time going back and forth between multiple people. So one team should ideally own that communication with the customer to really drive the issue to a resolution. And that just prevents the tickets from falling through the cracks and gives the customer like a really single point of contact, which just, always makes things easier. And really, finally, like the good support isn't about just closing the ticket, right? It's about recognizing those patterns again. If you see the same type of issue occurring over and over, that's an opportunity to improve the training, fix a process, like address some configuration or tuning issues. And then, that's when the support really becomes proactive instead of just being reactive.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. But it's a big theme that we have on this podcast is being proactive instead of reactive. Because again, like you could be sitting there and having these similar issues taking down your system. That costs money. That costs
Oh,
time.
yeah,
And
for
those
sure.
two things for a lot of our customers are something that they will not give away. So
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, all you have to do is kind of look, take a step back and understand the actual problem and attack it there. But that kind of goes into my next question here. How should some of these JDE customers decide whether they need application support or technical CNC support or maybe a combined support model?
Well, and that's like a really great question. And, again, we do have a lot of customers that come to us and they may not be clear on like what they actually need. And, I think our kind of recommendation is, think about this from the business perspective and really, look at your task tickets. Like look at, what's actually breaking. So whether you're looking at, let's say, the last 3 months or 6 months worth of issues that have come up, go through those tickets and read them. I know it takes time, but that's really like what is important and what helps you kind of identify the support that you need. So, looking at those patterns and that should really help you just determine like what direction to go in here for support. And again, the way I look at it from a business perspective is, if most of your issues are about the users and the business process and like actual functionality of using JDE, somebody can't post a transaction or a report's coming out incorrectly or master data is just an absolute mess. Set up questions on AP, something like that, or, procurement, manufacturing, that really points to application or functional support. That is the functional world, and it's people trying to do their job in a module and something is just not behaving. And now if you flip that, if most of your issues are about the system kind of underneath, again, that technical backbone, the environment setup, deployments, package builds, doing the tools release upgrades, applying ESUs, performance tuning, your batches, how how your batch jobs are running, security, that's all that technical level. That's the CNC side. And the users might not even see that directly, but when stuff goes sideways in JDE, like, and everything is going sideways, again, that points to you're having a lot of technical CNC issues, and you probably should go the CNC route for support specifically. And for like a lot of businesses, when they kind of sit down and do that exercise, again, I know it takes time, but the answer could honestly be, well, maybe we need both. And that's kind of the third tap. So, maybe you're having a lot of technical performance issues, but you also need help with how a module is working and that functionality of the module. So, when they're cross functional or when it's just kind of maybe really difficult to diagnose and you're having a lot of those cross functional issues, that's where maybe you start to look at, well, maybe I need functional application and I need CNC support. So, there's a thing, with the theme between the functional and technical side, right? But that's where the handoffs live, and that's where, the handoffs or where the time gets wasted. So when you can look at it like a company or a business that can provide both that functional and that technical support layer, and you can sit there and work with both teams, or they're working together behind the scenes, that combined model really kills that ping pong and that wasted time.
So, what questions should buyers ask a support partner before they sign up for something like this?
All right. Well, I think, one of the most important things buyers can do before signing up with a support partner is just get a very clear idea of what support actually means. And trust me, that word can mean, very different things from one provider to another. Um, we know this from experience. We hear this just based off of, talking to our customers and getting that feedback. And I'd really start by asking what's included in the application support. Are they only fixing issues when something breaks? Or, are they like actually helping with user questions and business processes and guidance and training and testing and ongoing optimization, right? So if you're using, if you're using JD Edwards from a CNC perspective, I'd also ask, what's covered there. So business support includes system administration, performance tuning, package build. Are they going to help us go into the right direction? When we're looking for guidance on what our system needs, do we need to upgrade those types of things? Is that included in that support that we're getting? Like I would also say too, like asking more questions on what is supported is so helpful too, because you might be surprised with what some companies offer support wise, other companies don't even think about, so we always try to look out for our customers. We always try to cover what we can for our customers, even if it's stuff that we don't necessarily support. We will try to help as best we can, right? We can't guarantee you we're going to be able to fix that problem, but we can be there for that support, whether that's the application side or if that's that technical layer. I think another important question is, how do they handle tickets that specifically aren't very clear? Um, exactly what we've been talking about, right? So in the real world, users don't always know what the problem is, whether that's technical, functional, again, maybe a training issue. So I feel like a good support partner should really have that structured triage of the process and how that identifies that root cause instead of just simply bouncing, the ticket between the teams. So you want to know that when you're looking for a support partner, that they have these support teams that are going to work together behind the scenes and really try to make the customer successful. I'd also want to know whether they provide both functional and technical support. So you want to make sure they have both that expertise. There might be companies that only kind of dabble in the functional side or that CNC side, right? So you want to make sure that if you're talking to a support company that you see if they can support both of those. And it's just really important to kind of understand where they draw the line between the support and the project work as well. Small enhancements, process improvement, small tools upgrades or configuration changes, sometimes those can fall into the gray area. So really setting, those expectations up front kind of helps avoid some of those surprises later. And I'd also ask, like, how do they deal with the reoccurring issues? Again, we talked about that earlier. If that same ticket keeps coming up, are they simply just resolving that over and over, or are they actually taking a step back and investigating that underlying cause and really trying to find a permanent solution so that this doesn't keep happening and it's not a pattern that keeps happening? So, uh, one last thing is just, like what monitoring tools do they use? I think that's kind of a really important question as well. How do they manage tickets? Do they, handle documentation? Do they document processes? Is there knowledge sharing? How do we handle escalation? Those types of things. And those types of things may not be exciting, but those are some of the most important things that you should know going into working with a support partner. And like ultimately, the best support partners, we don't just keep the lights on. We really help customers mature over time. We want to be the experts for you and help move you into the right direction. And instead of being reactive and trying to break fix these models, we want to have a proactive approach and we want to fix these reoccurring problems and help reduce these issues. And we want your system to be more stable. And that's just what our goal is at the end of the day. It's not just a hey, put in a ticket, we're gonna fix it, we're done. We really want to help support you and have the best, most efficient system as possible.
Yeah. So if you're if you're one of the customers that are out there right now listening to this, what would you say the best takeaway from this episode would be?
I mean, if you take nothing else from this whole conversation, the one thing that I would really want you to remember is it really comes down to that single question. Is this about how people work in JDE or how JDE itself runs on that technical backbone? Are you actually having issues with the functionality of JDE or the performance of JDE or both of these things, right? So, that's kind of the whole framework. So, it's really about how users work in the system. They're trying to enter an order or run reports or something's just not behaving. Again, think of that as application support. That's the functional side. And if it's about how the environment runs underneath, the servers or the package build, performance, that kind of stuff, how people work versus how the system runs, that one line will correctly sort out that vast majority of what kind of support you need. So, I would say sometimes it touches both. Don't force it to be in one box. And I think that's a mistake that I really warn people against. And there are some pretty reliable tells that you're kind of in both territories. And that's okay. It's okay to not always know whether it's a functional or CNC issue. So, when you genuinely can't tell what that root cause is, when the tickets start bouncing back and forth, nobody's owning it, problems show up right after deployment and something along those lines. When a technical problem is knocking over an actual business process or the business issue turns out to be tied back to some technical change, sometimes it's a signal. It's just your internal team is just underwater and can't cover that whole service area anymore. So here's why getting that right the first time matters. Putting that information into a ticket and really explaining that detail. The right support model can help really diagnose those issues faster. So the more information we have, the more that we can help you out and get to a solution faster. And it really cuts down on those repetitive issues and really prevents them from coming back. So it's time, it's money, and it's really sanity for your team, but also all the teams involved. So think of it that way too. So again, like the biggest takeaway here is, sort it out by how people work versus how the system runs. And when clearly, sometimes it could be treated as both, that is okay. But have a support team that can work together behind the scenes and really work together to get that issue resolved for you. And that's again something that our teams here at ERP Suites, we're great at that. We can assess where all these holes are and help you build up that right mix of application, CNC, and really just managed services support as a whole. So you're not just guessing and you're not just stuck trying to jam every problem into one specific category. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just to like pick this team or that team. It's really to get the issue resolved. And our main priority is just helping make our customers as successful as possible. So I would say that's my biggest takeaway. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And the more detailed you can be, the faster those tickets get closed, the faster that you can get your
100%.
system running the right way. And that's really the main takeaway here is the more detailed, and yes, you might not have a complete understanding of what is what, but as long as you are as detailed as you can possibly be with some of these problems, it'll get to the right people and your system will be healthier even faster.
Hmm.
But if your team is trying to figure out whether you need JD application support, technical CNC support, or maybe even both, ERP Suites can help you evaluate your current support model and identify the gaps. Whether you are dealing with reoccurring issues, system instability, limited internal expertise, or backup of JD work, ERP Suites brings the functional and the technical expertise to help you stabilize, support, and modernize your JDE environment. Visit erpsuites.com today to connect with their team and maybe figure out a little bit more about your system. But that's a wrap on today's episode of Not Your Grandpa's JD Edwards. But the big takeaway is this: application support and CNC support, they solve different problems. Application support helps the business use JDE correctly. CNC support keeps the technical environment running correctly. And when those two areas work together, JDE teams can resolve issues faster and reduce repeated problems. Huge shout out for you, Miranda. Thank you for joining us. If this episode was helpful, subscribe, leave a like, and share it with someone on your JDE, IT, or even your operations teams. But until next time, keep modernizing, keep asking better questions, and remember, this is not your grandpa's JD Edwards.